The last thing my husband ever said to me was I love you or goodbye. It was a name whispered with desperate urgency, a name that would unravel every truth I knew about my family. It changed my life forever. Before that moment, my life with Mark felt like a beautiful dream. We lived in a cozy house in Willow Creek, a quiet suburb in Ohio. Mark, with his kind eyes and gentle laugh, was my anchor. We had so many plans, a trip to Italy, maybe even starting a family. Our evenings were filled with shared jokes, planning our future, enjoying each other's company. Everything felt solid, safe, and full of promise. Then one ordinary Tuesday, everything shattered. Mark was on his way home from work just like any other day. He worked at a small engineering firm downtown. I was making his favorite lasagna, humming, thinking about our evening. The phone rang. It was the hospital. My heart stopped. They told me there had been an accident, a drunk driver, they said. Mark's car was hit head on. The world went silent. I dropped the phone, hands shaking. I drove to the hospital in a daze, streetlights blurring. My perfect life, our dreams, all felt suddenly fragile, hanging by a thin thread. When I finally reached his room, it was chaos. Doctors and nurses moved quickly, their faces grim. Mark lay there, connected to machines, his face pale, his breathing shallow. He looked so small, so broken. I rushed to his side, taking his hand. It was cold. He opened his eyes, just a sliver, and looked at me. There was so much pain, so much fear, but also a desperate need to tell me something. He tried to speak, a raspy sound caught in his throat. He struggled, his chest rising with immense effort. I leaned closer, tears streaming down my face. "It's okay, Mark," I whispered softly. But he was okay, he wouldn't be okay. He used every last bit of strength. His lips moved slowly, forming a single word. It was barely audible, a breath against the hum of machines. I had to strain to hear it. "Sarah," he whispered, just that one name, the name of my own sister. His eyes, full of a warning I couldn't yet understand, stared into mine. Then his grip loosened. The machines began to beep wildly. A flatline, doctors rushed in, but it was too late. He was truly gone, leaving me with a name and a questions. The world blurred, hospital sounds faded into a dull roar. Mark was gone, and his last word was not for me but for my sister Sarah. Why? What could it mean? Was it a plea, a warning? In that moment, surrounded by doctors declaring his time of death, all I felt was a crushing wave of grief. The confusion was a distant echo, drowned out by the pain. My husband, my love, was gone. He had left me with a puzzle, a final message I couldn't begin to understand. It felt like a cruel twist, a riddle at the worst possible moment. I just wanted him back. My life with Mark was a perfect dream. We lived in a quiet Ohio suburb, our house filled with laughter. Mark was my anchor, my best friend. We'd sit on our porch planning our future, a garden, a coastal trip, growing old. Our life felt safe, predictable, and full of love. I was Alara, he was Mark. I believed I knew his heart, every shared piece, no secrets. We built our world on trust, his coffee each morning, his hand each evening. We shared hopes, worries, silly stories. Our connection was deep, a bond I thought unbreakable. We were just living, loving, growing day by day. I never imagined our story would end abruptly, its final chapter beginning with a profound mystery. Then in an instant, everything shattered. It was an ordinary Tuesday. Mark was heading to the hardware store. We said our usual goodbyes, a quick kiss, but soon never came. A frantic phone call, a desperate voice, an accident on the highway. My world tilted, my heart pounded. The drive to the hospital was a blur of tears. The hospital corridors were stark white, cold, silent. Doctors spoke in hushed tones, faces grave. I sat, holding my breath, clinging to hope. Hours stretched into eternity. My mind raced, replaying our last morning, his smile, his voice. I just needed to see him, to say I love you one last time. Fear tightened its grip. Finally, they let me in. He lay there, pale, still, tubes and wires. I took his hand, warm but weak. His eyes fluttered open, finding mine, a desperate urgency, a struggle. He tried to speak, lips barely moving, a faint, raspy sound. I leaned closer, straining to hear, my heart aching with every breath. This was it, his last words. I waited, tears streaming, for I love you, for goodbye. I waited for comfort, but that wasn't what he said. His gaze, clouded with pain and a strange warning, fixed on me. The silence felt heavy. I held my breath, focused on his faint whisper. With a final, agonizing effort, his breath catching, he whispered a single name, a name I knew, now echoing chillingly. "Sarah," he breathed, barely audible before his eyes closed and his hand went limp. Just that one name, spoken with such desperate urgency. It would unravel every single truth I knew about my family, changing my life forever. The last thing my husband ever said to me wasn't "I love you" or "goodbye." It was a name whispered with such a desperate urgency, a name that would unravel every single truth I thought I knew about my family and change my life forever. My life with Mark in Maple Creek, Ohio felt like a dream. We built a cozy home filled with laughter and his Sunday morning pancakes. He was my rock, my best friend, always knowing how to make me smile. We had plans, a trip to the coast next summer, renovating the kitchen, maybe even starting a family soon. Our future stretched out bright and clear like a wide-open highway on a sunny day. We believed in each other, in our shared path. Then one ordinary Tuesday, everything shattered. The phone call came, a voice I barely recognized, telling me there had been an accident. Mark's car, a drunk driver, my world tilted. I remember the frantic drive to the hospital, the blur of flashing lights, the cold waiting room. Every breath felt like a struggle. doctors spoke in hushed tones, words like critical and severe injuries hanging heavy. I just wanted to see him, to hold his hand, to tell him everything would be okay, even though my heart knew it might not be. Finally, they let me in. Mark lay there so still, tubes and wires everywhere. His face was pale, but his eyes, when they fluttered open, still held that familiar warmth mixed with a deep, unsettling fear. He tried to speak, his lips moving without sound. I leaned closer, my ear next to his mouth, tears streaming down my face. "It's okay, my love," I whispered. "Don't try to talk, just rest." But he shook his head slightly, a desperate energy in his weak grip. He had something important to say. With every ounce of his remaining strength, he tried again. His breath was shallow, his voice a mere rasp, barely audible. He looked into my eyes, a silent plea, a warning. Then, just before his eyes closed, one name escaped his lips. Willa. It wasn't a question nor a casual mention. It was sharp, urgent, filled with an emotion I couldn't place, sorrow and accusation. The sound hung in the sterile air, a stark contrast to the quiet beeping of machines, and then he was gone. The doctors came in, faces grim, their words a distant hum. All I could hear was Willa. Who was Willa? Why was that the last word Mark spoke? Not my name, not I love you, not a final goodbye, but Willa. My mind raced, seeking a connection, a reason. The grief was a crushing weight. Beneath it, a sharp shard of confusion began to fester. It was a riddle whispered from death's edge, and I knew this single name held a secret, one that would soon demand to be uncovered. My name is Willa. Not long ago, my life felt like a sunlit dream. Mark, my husband, was my whole world. We lived in a cozy house in a quiet suburb of Ohio. Every Sunday, we'd wake up early, make pancakes, and talk about our future plans. We dreamed of opening a small bookstore, a place filled with warm coffee and compelling stories. We even picked out a name, The Quiet Corner. Mark had a laugh that could fill any room. He was my rock, my best friend, making every ordinary day feel truly extraordinary. Our life together was simple, but it was perfect. Then one Tuesday, everything shattered. It was a rainy afternoon. Mark was driving home from his job at the local university just like any other normal day. I was making dinner, humming to myself, thinking about TV later. The phone rang. It was the hospital, a car accident. Those words, car accident, felt like a punch to my stomach. My world tilted. I dropped the spatula, the sound echoing in our silent kitchen. My heart pounded so hard. I rushed out the door, rain blurring my vision, not knowing my life was about to change forever. The hospital was a blur of bright lights and hushed voices. They let me into his room. Mark was there, lying still and pale. Machines beeped around him, keeping him alive, but his breath was shallow. His eyes, usually so full of life, were half closed. He saw me. I leaned close, holding his hand, feeling how cold it was. I whispered his name, telling him I was there, telling him everything would be okay. He tried to speak. I saw the effort, the struggle in his face. His lips moved very slowly, forming a sound, a word, but it was so soft, almost a sigh. I leaned even closer, straining to hear him, my ear almost touching his lips. He gathered all his strength, a tiny flicker in his fatting eyes, and then I heard it, a single word, barely audible, like a whisper on the wind. Sarah, just Sarah, not I love you, not goodbye, just that name. It hung in the air, strange and unexpected. My mind raced. Sarah, why Sarah? Before I could even ask, before I could process what he'd said, his grip on my hand loosened. The beeping of the machines changed, doctors rushed in, and Mark was gone. My world collapsed in that moment. The grief was a physical weight crushing me, but beneath the raw pain, a seed of confusion grew from his last word. Sarah. It didn't make sense. Why would he say that name? Was it a warning, a plea, or just a random thought? In his final, clouded moments, I held on to that name, turning it over and over in my mind, even as tears streamed down my face. It was a puzzle, a mystery he left behind, mixed with the unbearable ache of losing him. His last breath, carrying that single word, became a haunting question. Before everything changed, before the world broke into pieces, there was Mark, and there was our life. It felt like a dream, the kind you never want to wake up from. We lived in Maple Creek, a quiet town in Vermont, in a small house with a porch swing. Every morning, Mark would make coffee, and we'd sit there watching the sun rise over the green hills. He had this way of looking at me like I was the only person in the world. His eyes, a warm hazel, always held a gentle kindness. Our days were filled with laughter, simple joys, and a deep, comforting peace. We had built something beautiful, something strong together. Our biggest dream was to fill that little house with the sounds of children. We had names picked out, Lily for a girl and Owen for a boy. We talked about their future, about teaching them to ride bikes down our quiet street, about summer evenings chasing fireflies. Mark was already planning a treehouse in the backyard, sketching designs in his old notebook. He was a carpenter, so his hands were always busy, always creating. He built our kitchen table, the bookshelves, even the wooden toys we had saved. Everything he touched felt solid, made with love and care, just like our life together. Our life wasn't about grand adventures every day. It was about the small, everyday moments that added up to something extraordinary. Sunday mornings meant pancakes and the newspaper spread out on the table Mark built. Evenings were for long walks around the neighborhood, holding hands, talking about our day. Sometimes we'd just sit on the porch swing, listening to the crickets, not needing to say a word. Mark would often hum old songs softly. He loved to cook, especially his famous chili, and I loved to watch him, covered in flour, laughing. These were the moments that formed the fabric of our happiness. I remember the day we met at a small local fair. He was helping his uncle set up a booth, and I was just looking at handmade crafts. Our eyes met over a display of carved wooden birds. He had the kindest smile, shy but genuine. We talked for hours that day about everything and nothing. It felt like we had known each other forever. From that moment, my world felt brighter, more complete. He brought a quiet strength into my life, a sense of belonging I hadn't realized I was missing. We fell in love quickly, deeply, and without a single doubt. Mark was my anchor, my best friend, my absolute everything. He made me feel safe, truly seen, and deeply loved. We planned our future down to the smallest detail, from the color we'd paint the nursery to the places we'd travel when we were older. We imagined growing old together, sitting on that same porch swing, still holding hands. Our life was a beautiful tapestry, woven with trust, shared dreams, and unwavering devotion. I believed we had a lifetime ahead of us, a future filled with joy and simple, profound happiness. We were a team, a unit perfectly matched. It felt like nothing could ever break us apart, or so I believed. It was a Tuesday, a regular Tuesday in late spring. The sun was bright over our quiet suburb in Ohio. Mark had left for work like any other morning. He kissed me goodbye, told me he loved me, and promised to pick up dinner. Our dog Gus whined at the door as Mark's blue sedan pulled out of the driveway. I waved until his car was out of sight, a small, happy ritual. I spent the day working from home, planning our weekend trip to the lake. Everything felt perfectly ordinary, perfectly safe. I remember thinking about wine, just small, happy thoughts, the kind you have when life is good and wonderfully predictable. The phone rang late in the afternoon. It wasn't Mark. It was a voice I didn't know, calm, steady, and too distant. "Are you Mrs. Miller?" they asked. My heart immediately started to pound. You just know before they even say it. They told me there had been an accident, a car crash on Maple Street not far from his office. My legs felt weak like water. I dropped the phone but quickly picked it up, my hand shaking. The world around me seemed to blur, sounds faded. It was like someone hit pause on my life, then play, but everything was terribly, horribly wrong. I don't remember driving to the hospital. It was a blur of flashing lights in my rearview mirror, the sound of my own ragged breath. My mind kept trying to reject the news. An accident, Mark, he was always so careful, he never sped, always checked his mirrors. This couldn't be happening. This was a mistake. I kept telling myself it's just a small fender bender, he'll be fine, just scratches. But the cold dread in my stomach told a different story. The hospital waiting room was bright, too bright, and filled with strangers. Each face seemed to hold a silent question, a shared fear. Then a doctor came out. Her face was kind, but her eyes held a deep sadness. She spoke softly, using medical words that didn't make sense to me. All I heard was severe injuries and critical condition. It was like a punch to the gut. The air left my lungs. I felt a scream try to escape, but no sound came out. My perfect life, the one I had built with Mark, filled with laughter and plans for the future, shattered into a million pieces. It was gone. Everything was gone. My knees buckled, and a kind nurse helped me into a chair. They led me to his room. The sterile smell of the hospital hit me hard. He lay there so still, so pale. Tubes and wires connected him to machines that beeped softly. His strong hands, the ones that always held mine so gently, were now limp. His face, usually so full of life and warmth, was bruised and shadowed. It was him, but it wasn't him. My Mark, my love, was trapped somewhere between this world and the next. I reached for his hand, my fingers tracing familiar lines. A tear fell onto his skin, a silent prayer for a miracle that wouldn't come. The sterile smell of the hospital room filled my nose. Mark lay on the bed, pale and still, a stark contrast to the vibrant man I knew. Wires connected him to blinking machines, each beep a painful reminder of how fragile life was. My hand trembled as I held his, trying to offer strength I didn't feel. His eyelids fluttered, a tiny sign of life that made my heart leap. "Mark," I whispered, my voice thick with unshed tears. He was in so much pain I could see it. The doctors had told me to prepare. But how do you prepare for something like this? How do you say goodbye when you haven't even said hello to a new day? He looked at me, his eyes cloudy but full of something urgent. He tried to speak, a raspy sound escaping his lips. I leaned closer, straining to hear, my ear almost touching his mouth. "Don't try to talk, my love," I murmured, stroking his hair. "Just rest. I'm here, I'm right here." But he shook his head, a slight, almost imperceptible movement. His hand, so strong just hours before, squeezed mine with surprising force. It was a desperate grip, telling me he had something important to say. Something that could not wait. The monitors around us kept their steady rhythm, a pulse of artificial life in the quiet room. A doctor had briefly stepped in earlier, his face grim. He spoke softly about Mark's internal injuries, about the slim chances. He had told me Mark might try to communicate, but that it would be very difficult, maybe even confusing. He warned me not to push him, but how could I not listen? Mark's eyes pleaded with me, his brow furrowed with immense effort. He took a shallow breath, his chest rising and falling painfully. A sound, a small groan, escaped him. It was a sound of deep struggle, of a man fighting against the fading light, trying to reach me one last time. His lips moved again, slowly, forming a shape. I held my breath, my entire world narrowing to this one moment, this one sound. "What is it, Mark? What are you trying to say?" I encouraged him, my own voice barely a whisper. He squeezed my hand harder, his knuckles white. His eyes, usually so full of warmth and laughter, were now filled with a raw, intense focus. He was fighting, truly fighting, to get these words out. It wasn't just a random sound, it was a determined attempt. He needed me to understand, he needed me to hear him. It was a final, powerful effort. Then, with one last monumental push, a faint whisper escaped him, so soft, so fragile, it almost vanished into the sterile air, but I heard it, a single word, a name, my sister's name. Sarah, he breathed, his voice barely audible, filled with an urgency that sent a shiver down my spine, and then his grip loosened. His eyes, still fixed on mine, slowly lost their light. The machines around us continued their monotonous beeping, but in my heart, everything had gone silent. He was gone. And all I had left was that name, hanging in the air, a mystery I couldn't yet grasp.